So just like always, we got a few more answers and a lot more questions. But definitely more answers this episode for sure, because we finally learn about Boyd's background and how he found the talismans. And we finally get the details about his wife Abby. Plus, I've got some pretty interesting theories that I would like to share with you guys along the way. But let's go ahead and get into the recap for episode 8 titled Broken Windows, Open Doors. So the episode begins at the police station, showing us Boyd as he prepares to head out into the woods. Then Kenny walks in to inform Boyd about the accommodations made in town for the Colony House residents. Then he tells Boyd how they might need to round up everyone and provide some words of encouragement, and Boyd agrees, and he tells Kenny like, yeah, that's a good idea, you should go ahead and handle that. But Kenny responds by telling Boyd that he should be the one to do it instead, because it would mean more coming from him. And Boyd just sort of tunes out and agrees with Kenny, mainly because he's still dealing with the loss of Father Cautry. Then Boyd proceeds to tell Kenny how Father Cautry risked his life to save him and his family the night they arrived in town. Afterwards, Boyd suddenly needs to leave, but Kenny wants his help, but Boyd insists that it's time for him to learn to do things like this on his own. Later we find out that Boyd left to get Sarah from the basement of the church. Then we jump to a flashback of Boyd and his family on the road before they arrived in the town. We hear the song If I Had a Boat playing in the background, which was the same song from the diner when Boyd asked Abby for a sign. So in this scene we find out that Boyd has really been wanting a boat, and Abby and Ellis end up surprising him with one as a retirement gift, since he was currently in the process of retiring from the military. And after the good news, they run across that damn tree in the road. Now it's time for me to come with the theories I have regarding the car scene, because I think there's one major detail that gets revealed that might have a greater meaning later in the show, or in the next season, if there is a next season. Jesus Christ, I hope there's a next season. But that major detail is Boyd's military history. Now, yes, Boyd and Abby both served in the military, but the important details here are linked to Boyd. So Boyd talked about what he was known for when he served. He said they used to call him Mr. Fish and Loaves because they would send him to set up bases in the military, and regardless of how many resources they had, he would make them work. Which is also a little foreshadowing for what happens later in this episode when Boyd begins to help the town. So the nickname Mr. Fish and Loaves is another biblical reference, and there have been quite a few of those in the show so far, mainly like the ones mentioned in episode 6 titled Book 74, the book that has yet to be written, implying that the people of the town are currently writing that book. But Boyd's nickname, Mr. Fish and Loaves, comes from the Bible, where Jesus took 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread and magically turned it into enough food to feed 5,000 people, and that's pretty much the gist of it. But Boyd seems to be destined to lead the people of the town to salvation, and it's actually ironic that he ends up in the town just as he's trying to transition into retirement from basically exactly what he's doing now, which is being a leader. And since Boyd didn't really seem to have a broken family at all before he ended up there, unlike some of the others, my guess is that something actually sent him there as a last assignment, which is to save those currently trapped there. And everything has basically been pointing at Boyd to be the savior so far throughout the series. After the flashback, we jump back to the current day where we see Boyd and Sarah in the woods. Boyd informs Sarah about the events that took place at Colony House, and she also finds out that Father Cautry didn't survive that night. Boyd also threatens to kill her crazy ass the moment she proves Father Cautry to be wrong as far as her, being useful because she can hear the voices. And also during this scene, Boyd actually reveals some new details about the monsters. He tells Sarah that they used to shriek all night before he found the talismans, and after the talismans they began to whisper. So this sounds to me like the shrieks may have been used as like a tactic to force them to reveal their hiding locations, because Boyd mentions how the shrieks would drive people crazy. So the talismans worked in another way also, which was used to mitigate the shrieks of the monsters, because to me it sounds like the shrieks were used as a form of torture to sort of lure them out, by driving them crazy. So yeah, here is where we find out that the talismans can actually be used to do other things besides, just keeping the monsters out. Then we cut to Jade as he finds out that he'll be sharing Kenny's place with some Colony House residents for a while, which of course, he isn't too happy about. But in this moment, Jade asks the Colony House residents about Victor's whereabouts, and one of them says that they saw him going into the woods with Julie. Meanwhile, at the Matthews, Julie fills in the family on the Colony House events, along with how she was able to escape. She tells them that she was upstairs with Victor, and their reaction was fucking hilarious. They were like, oh shit, where did we go wrong? But she explains to them how it wasn't like that, and how Victor actually saved her by pushing her inside of a faraway tree, and how he told her that it was starting, but of course we still aren't sure about what it is exactly. So yeah, I'm thinking that maybe this place is about to be purged and reset somehow, which I know a lot of people are thinking that, and I've been feeling that way about this theory as well, but of course we're just not certain about that. Then little Ethan tells the family about the faraway trees and how they work, and how they have to find Victor because he must have ended up somewhere else. During this time, Julie walks away and begins to have a panic attack because nothing makes sense. And then Jade barges in again during what's obviously a bad time, and he's like, "Where's Victor?" because someone said they saw you with him, and then Jim shoves his ass outside. But what I found so funny about this scene was that as Tabitha was trying to calm Julie down, Ethan walks up and adds to her, confusion and frustration by telling her about the hole they've been digging to find out where the cords lead. And then she really loses her shit after this because although Ethan was being very innocent in this moment, Julie wasn't really ready to take in any more illogical events like, the whole wire situation. Then Jade barging in and asking about Victor just made shit even worse. So it was just a very unintentional, chaotic situation for her, and it was pretty funny because little Ethan was like, "But wait, there's more." Then outside on the porch, Jim seems a bit fed up with Jade's BS, and he's like, "You're starting to piss me off, but your crazy ideas are kind of working out." Then he tells Jade about the idea to build the radio tower on the top of Colony House. So honestly, the most important thing about this scene is the fact that Victor might know what the symbol means if they can find him. But we also kind of knew this already from episode 7 when Jade initially found the picture in the book that had the symbols. So not really much new information here, really. Then we jump back to Boyd's flashback where we see him and his family finally arriving into the town. This is when Boyd first met Father Khatri as he was pleading Boyd and his family to follow him to safety. He was finally able to convince them after they heard the shrieking of the monsters coming from the woods. Boyd asked what the sound was and Father Khatri said that it was the sound of death. And after following Father Khatri, they all spent the night hiding underground with Donna and that one random guy who got into it with Ellis last episode. Then we jump back to the current day at the clinic where we see Christy nursing Ellis's arm as Fatima sits by his side, because she's a ride or die. Then Kenny walks in to check with Christy to see if there's anything that he can help out with. And Christy tells Kenny that she's going to need help making sure that the clinic is secure overnight. And Christy finally shows Kenny some appreciation by giving him a kiss on the cheek. So it actually might turn out to be a real good night for Kenny, if he's lucky. Then we cut over to Colony House where Jim and Jade is asking Donna about the radio tower. And Donna says yes because she doesn't believe that anyone is coming back and that they might as well use the house for something. Also, Donna reveals that 14 people died during the Colony House massacre, so the number of graves that Victor dug actually didn't really have any significance. As he said, he was only getting a head start this time. Back in the woods, we see Boyd hiding Sarah in a shed as he goes back to town to handle some things before they leave. Then we jump back to Boyd's flashback where we see everyone who made it through the night is now coming out of hiding. Father Khatri tells Boyd to meet him at the diner, and then he explains everything to the Stevens about the town. He also tells Boyd that everyone has basically just been doing their own thing trying to survive, and Boyd tells him that they need a system where everyone looks out for each other and no one hides in the same place twice. So Boyd starts to whip everyone into shape and he tells them that they need to start digging up new places to hide. Then back in the current time at the Matthews, we see Ethan upstairs checking out Victor's art, and I will be pointing out something about this art later. And then we see Tabitha and Julie down in the basement discussing Thomas and her parents' divorce. We find out that Thomas died when he fell off the changing table because Jim and Tabitha were both distracted. Then we jump to Boyd over at the diner where we see him preventing a riot over the supplies because the townspeople are upset that they have to share their supplies with the Colony House residents. Then back in the flashback with Boyd and Father Khatri, we see them discussing scavenging supplies from the woods. Then Boyd tells Father Khatri that he served 30 years in the military and that his wife Abby was a Marine. During this time, we cut to Abby who's standing in the middle of the road just staring at something. Then Ellis walks up and asked her if she was okay, and she responds by telling him that she was just thinking about a dream that she had when she was a little girl. And then she begins to say what sounds like "I was," and then she never finishes the sentence. She was like, "I had a dream when I was a little girl and I was..." So yeah, it sounds like they were actually going to give us some more details about Abby to support the whole, everyone who ends up in the town is going through a difficult time theory. But unfortunately, we actually don't get enough details on her past in this scene. Back in current time at the police station, Boyd tells Kenny that he's no longer leaving because of the riot that almost happened at the diner. But Kenny decides to grow a large pair of elephant nuts in this moment, and he tells Boyd to take his ass to the woods to find a way home, and then he storms out. During this time, Donna walks in and witnesses Kenny as he goes through puberty, and her and Boyd are both surprised that Kenny has now become a man. But Donna is also curious to learn more about this whole mission that Boyd is about to take into the woods. So Boyd tells her they'll go for a walk and he'll fill her in on the details. Then we go back to the flashback where we see Boyd coming from the woods with a goat, and he tells Father Khatri that he also saw chickens. During this time, Ellis walks up and tries to get Boyd to stay because Abby hasn't been doing well. He says that he thinks this place is starting to get to her, and he pleads for Boyd to stay, but Boyd insists that they will talk later that night when he gets back from gathering supplies from the woods. So there's actually something I wanted to point out from this scene before moving forward, and I don't know if you guys actually caught this, but this is a picture that Victor drew from back in the day of Boyd finding the goat. Now I don't think we ever get to see Victor in Boyd's flashback, so I'm thinking maybe he was hiding from everyone during this time and possibly just staying out in the woods and traveling through the faraway trees and the bunker, but he was definitely keeping an eye on everyone during this time. But back to the recap, we see Boyd marking trees before he comes across a dog in the woods. He assumes that the dog is out there with someone, so when the dog takes off running, Boyd follows it. He eventually loses track of the dog and suddenly finds himself lost. But he tries to search for the markings on the trees, but he has no luck and he ends up getting caught in the dark. During this time, he stumbles into some type of small stone hut or some type of like mini cave where he finds the talismans. And he discovers in this moment that they must be special due to the monsters approaching him and then walking away. So I personally had a few nitpicks with this scene because, you know, Boyd discovering the talismans was cool, but him assuming that it was the stones and that all 12 of them behaved the same way seemed like a stretch to me. I mean, I felt like he could have just as easily assumed that there was something about that location in particular and not just the stones. I mean, I don't know, I just feel like he figured that out too easily. Then there was the fact that there were only vines and leaves blocking the entrance when he fell into that tiny hut. So I'm guessing something like that counts as a closed off area, which seemed a little bit weird to me. But like I said, I am being a little bit nitpicky. I don't know, you guys let me know if you agree or disagree, but I'm willing to let that go, just like the blood on Mustard Boo Jasmine's collar. Because, you know, I actually love this series, so whatever, you know, everything can't be perfect. Then we jump back to the current day where we see Boyd at the clinic telling Ellis that he's proud of him before he leaves. After Boyd walks away, Fatima tells Ellis that if he doesn't go after him, he'll regret it for the rest of his life. Then standing outside the clinic in her own special way, Donna wishes Boyd good luck. Then we jump to the last flashback of this episode where we see Boyd returning with the talismans. During this time, he hears gunshots coming from the town. He sees that Abby is going on a killing spree and he tries to calm her down. But she thinks that Boyd isn't real in this moment because she feels like no one would have been able to survive overnight in the woods. Then Ellis runs up and yells "Mom," and Abby turns around to shoot him. But before she has a chance to pull the trigger, Boyd kills her to save him. Then we jump back to the current time where we see Ellis has followed Boyd out into the woods to finally apologize. During this time, Ellis sees Sarah, but Boyd asked Ellis not to tell anyone because he needs her to find a way out, and he tells Ellis to trust him. And also, I thought it was really great attention to detail that we now know what Ellis's necklace means and the fact that it used to belong to his mother. It was very dope for them to add that subtle detail there throughout the show because it's always been there. Meanwhile, back in town, we see Kenny and Donna telling everyone that they'll be living together as one community until Colony House is fixed, so they need to act right. But she tells them first they need to focus on building the radio tower. Then the episode ends with Boyd throwing the handcuffs on Sarah and them setting off on their journey into the woods. So, we now know how Boyd found the talismans and how he found out how to use them. So let me know if you guys were actually satisfied with their explanation because I felt a bit shaky on it, as you guys already know. So let me know if that explanation satisfied you guys. Also, do you guys think that Victor was actually hanging out in the woods during his early days after whatever happened to his parents happened? I mean, maybe he was just roaming around in the woods watching people and drawing pictures of them. And then maybe he finally came back to the town once he saw that it was safe and that they had the talismans and the livestock. You know, they actually figured out how to live amongst the monsters. And another thing, I think that dog might be a ghost dog or something because that dog looks like it hasn't aged since when Victor was a kid, all the way up to the point where Boyd and his family actually arrived in the town. And then when the Matthews arrived, they also saw the same dog. So I mean, how many years are we talking about here? Somewhere between 30 to 35 years from when Victor was a kid to his current age, maybe something like that. So yeah, that dog would have been dead a long time ago. So is it the town that's keeping that dog alive, or is the dog even real? What do you guys think? And I also want to know how you guys feel about the whole Mr. Fish and Loaves thing, you know, the biblical reference with Boyd. I mean, he always has the ability to use very little resources to help others, and he's been doing this since the military. military, and now he's doing it in the town, once again going out in the woods trying to lead a group of people to salvation. You know, he's beginning to sound a little like Jesus, but what do you guys think about this? But as always, there you have it, and if you enjoyed the content, you know what to do. Thank you for watching.